This is the future. Evolution. This is the future. Evolution.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I caught you about 4 o'clock in the afternoon out in the east. Of course, I'm BMR, bigfootmichiganrob. Thanks everybody for coming on in. So I'm going back and forth with some things, right? You know that I do have 3 scheduled shows live during the week, and Tuesday nights at 9 with Krista, Thursday afternoons at 1 with Tex, and of course Saturday night with the gals and Tex when he's available. And but I've been doing this is like my 4th live show doing these encounter stories, right? True cryptid encounter stories, and you guys really seem to like them. So I'm going to continue on doing these. The only problem I have is getting a schedule to have it on a regular basis, because right now these are kind of random because I got such a busy schedule with all the other things that I do. But you guys do like these, so I'm going to do these right now. It's going to be random. I just got to figure out what days I can do these so I can have a schedule for everybody, which means turn on your alert bells. Your alert bells, you won't miss a show. You won't miss a show. And while I'm at it, please subscribe to Bigfoot Michiganrob on YouTube if you're new. Texas Front Porch, found on YouTube if you're new. The Blondes and the Booze, Paranormal Podcast if you're new. Paranormal Paul, Danielle Diva, Monica Rollins, Our Paranormal World. Please check them out. Turn on your alert bells. Thank you ever so much for that. The Super Chat's open. It's a great way to help support what we all do around here. You also can become a BMR pirate. Mateys, join the many, join the few. Depends on your point of view. Donations are not expected, but always, of course, appreciated. I love each and every single one of you helping me get to where I am today, because without my audience, I wouldn't be doing this. So thank you to all of you, not only in the chat room, but to the people out there that they'll watch and don't participate, because you're valued just as much as everybody else. And I do have 3 Dogman encounter stories I'm going to do. 2 of them take place in cemeteries. What's up with Dogman and cemeteries? And another one doesn't quite take place in a cemetery, but it's equally as, thrilling and very, very chilling, very chilling. Of course, though, as you all know, I've got to talk a little bit before we get rolling here about our conference, right? You guys all know about our Crossing the Realms Conference, UFOs, Paranormal and Cryptid, September 19th and 20th, Eagleton Civic Center in Richmond, Missouri. We got a great lineup. Master of Ceremonies is Tex Wesson. You've got Josh Hurd, Heather. These are the speakers: Josh Hurd, Heather Mosier, Frankie, and Dan from the Haunted Garage. They also will be bringing a haunted car. Greg Ogles, filmmaker and researcher. William Lunsford, Falk monster researcher. The great, you guys have seen Ronald on my show several times. Ronald Murphy, Lady Ann Celine, Dr. Dean Bertram. And we've got some special guests: Dana Stricker, Ken Gerhard, Brent Thomas. Oh, no, by the way, we added Brian Bowden as a speaker, and Miguel from Sasquatch Theory are also speakers. And going back to our special guests: Ken Gerhard, Dana Stricker, Brent Thomas, Ryan Edwards, Mike Familiant. He was on last night with the Blondes and Booze. Go check that out. It was a great show. Christopher Garantano, Linda Eastburn, and David Glidden. They're all going to be there, as well as myself, the Blondes, the Boos, Tex, Donnie Show, Paranormal Paul, Daniel Diva. We are all going to be there. It's going to be a fantastic event. You guys all know our ghost hunt is already sold out. So, yeah, you can't get in on that because that's sold out. I can't believe it. There's 8.5 months to go before we get started. And you know what? It looks like it's going to be a great turnout. Hi to Diane Boss, Judy Wheeler, Symphony Wicked, Keith from Michigan. Hey, Keith, buddy. Keith will be featured on the show upcoming pretty soon. I got to get together with Keith on that. Who else is popping on in here? Denise, hi, Denise. Pops, hey, Gary Spikes. Edith Gomez. Joe Stewart, hey, Joe, what's happening, brother? Blah, blah, blah. Gemini Moon. Hi, Gemini, another Michigander coming on in. Mickey G, how you doing, Mickey? Blah blah, going through. That's about all I see here. If I missed you, sorry, but yeah, you guys are all starting to fill up quite nicely. So yeah, this is kind of I'm trying to figure out how to schedule this out, you guys. Hi, Audacious Amber. I'm trying to figure out how to schedule this because you guys like these when I give you these when I tell these accounts, right? So for the time being, they're going to be impromptu until I get a schedule with the other 3 shows I do, and not to mention I'm on with Tex, I'm on with the Blondes. You guys all know you guys all know everything. Hi, little Patty, how you doing? So that takes care of all the business. Talking about this conference, the scheduling, and I'm sporting my Lions gear now. I will have a show Saturday night. We backed up the Saturday night shows from midnight to 11. Simply because of you folks. They say, Robbie, come on, just a wee too late. So we backed up the time for 11. My conundrum is this. The Detroit Lions, they're playing in the playoffs against the Washington Commanders. The game starts at 8 at night Saturday. I wasn't expecting that. I will be late for my own show, but the gals will be there and Tex will be there. And I will be coming on a little later in that show to either be disappointed or gratefully happy with the Lions' victory. So thanks to all of you for coming on in. Super chats open, memberships are open. Please subscribe, and all of you that helped me get well over 5,000 subs now. I appreciate, love you all. So I'm going to get on with 3 of these Dogman tales. The first one won't be in the cemetery. I'm going to leave those 2 for last. And I'm going to, I need a little bit of light here. Something's going on with my lighting. I don't know. It seems a little bit better. Thank you to everybody. And I'm going to get started. I got this from this guy named Dan some time back talking about a Dogman encounter in Wisconsin. And in fact, this takes place in Devil Lake, Wisconsin. That's the name of the place. I actually looked it up, and yeah, it's there. And he goes on to tell me about his account with an alleged Dogman. So kick back, enjoy. Thanks for coming on in. Hit the like button, please. Excuse me, if you would. Thank you. So he goes on and says, hey, man, hey, Rob, call me Dan for this email. Thank you, Keith. I appreciate you, man, for that great way to start off the show. From Michigan, Mr. Keith from Oakland County, Michigan. Thank you ever so much, brother. Thank you. Great way to start the show. Appreciate you. So anyways, yeah, referring back, so he goes, Rob, I decided to send you this email, and here's what I experienced. He goes on to tell me this took place, everybody, like in the summer of 2011, Devil's Lake State Park, Wisconsin. Hi, Isaac. How you doing, bro? Hi, Denise. Where he goes on to tell me this is when he had one of the most scariest experiences of his life. He says that it was the weekend of his 30th birthday, and this took place in June. And he also involved in the story is his friend Jack. He goes on to say that he himself and his friend Jack decided to go camping, just outside of the park. And in this park, you guys, they were unsure if they could stay overnight. I guess they didn't read the rules, the regulations, because as you know, some state parks and national forests, you're not allowed to stay overnight. And I found that odd because I looked up this, and you know, there are a lot of parks. I thought every park you could camp in. So I guess this particular one, he was unsure. And Jack and Dan and his buddy Jack were amateur Bigfoot researchers, and they heard about several different accounts that took place here in the park. And again, they heard of possible sightings at Devil's Park. So Jack and himself decided to take to the forest and look for some evidence. Okay, and Jack and Dan goes on to say that he and Jack had been looking for a Bigfoot for about 3 years, and have come across some potential evidence. They found throughout their 3 years. They found some scat samples. They found some hair, and they also found a cool print where they got a 19-inch casting of a Bigfoot track. He said it was very cool because it came along with 5 very distinct toes, so they're very excited. He did beg the question, everybody, that he thought perhaps it could be human, but then he was thinking, who really walks the forest barefoot? I know that none of us walk in the forest barefoot. If you do, I suggest or advise against it. I really do. Thank you, Paul, gifting 1 Bigfoot Michigan Rob membership. Thank you ever so much. I appreciate you. So he goes on to explain that weirder things in his life has happened. So it wasn't all that surprising, but he still had some doubts, everybody. So anyway, when they go do whether you're going on their little venture, they found a great camping site just outside of Devil's Lake State Park, because I guess they weren't allowed to camp overnight. So they found a place right on the fringe. Okay, Paul, your Sin's hubby. Hey, how you doing? I'm kind of reading the chat, but at the same time, I'm trying to remember the stories, so you'll have to excuse me if I miss you. Anyway, it's something I have to work on and practice, right? Whoa, thank you, Simply Wicked. Go Lions. Simply Wicked. Thank you ever so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you for that awesome super chat. So, again, Dan and his buddy, they found a place outside of Devil's Lake State Park. So they decided they had an option to do their research in the surrounding forest or venture off back into the state grounds. So they decided to do both. They had heard of the several possibilities of the Bigfoot sightings in the park, and this was reported by fishermen and kayak boaters. So they decided they first would go into the state park to do their exploring. So they started out their first day of the high-head trip with a 3-mile hike just outside of the campsite. And so as they're going through here and rummaging through here, they immediately found tree breaks about 7 feet off the ground, and they said they're fresh breaks. And you could see white and yellow fibers. They did not appear to be very odd or very old. Whoa, thank you, Paul. Thanks, hubby of Sinfully. Another super chat. Wow, this is a very, very unexpected. I appreciate you guys. It's very greatly appreciated. So thank you ever so much for that, my friend. Thank you. So and there was no, and these were fresh breaks, you guys. They weren't affected by storms. It wasn't snowfall that broke them. They were very fresh. You can see the fibers. You can see the freshness of these things. Okay. And so, again, they just ventured on looking for more evidence, and they said that these tree branches were very thick in diameter, up to 3 to 4 inches. So these are these limbs being broken, you guys, not by forces of nature, but by forces of something. And again, in these tree breaks, they weren't snapped because they were moist. So not only were these these limbs snapped, but they were also twisted. He goes on to say it wasn't like a lightning strike. And again, repeats himself, not from the ice, it's not from the snow, it wasn't from the previous winter. Oh my God, Keith, yes, another interruption. Yes, yes. Go ahead, keep interrupting. Another $5 from Keith. I love you guys. Again, thank you so much. It's really awesome of you guys. Thank you, Keith. And so going back, thank you. So they're very excited, you guys. And so they continue down this trail that they found. They say about 100 yards in, they found what appeared to be canine tracks now. So now they're thinking they have this Bigfoot evidence. And now all of a sudden, these tracks, they come up, and they had a casting of a Bigfoot from this area. And now they come across canine tracks. And he says that these tracks went on for like several feet. And he says, he goes, "Hey, Rob, I can see very 3 distinct digits of which appeared to be the claws extending outward from its finger-like digits." So they go on, I guess they take a measurement, and from the end of the claws expanded out, you guys, 6 inches long. So from the end of the fingers now extend claws. According to these guys, they measured 6 inches. They go on to say that the entire length of the print was over 8 inches long, and it was 4 inches wide. He goes on to say, "Hey, Rob, man, I know what bear tracks look like." He goes, "Hey, man, this was not a bear." Hi, Mark. Hi, Dean. If you're new, please subscribe to BMR. I appreciate y'all coming on in. So he goes, "Man, this was not a bear, not at all." But he also says, Rob, as weird as it sounds, he didn't even think it was a wolf track because of the size, the length of the digits, the length of the claws. Goes on to say it just had to be something else. But what was it? They're trying to, Jack and Dan are getting together and they're trying to decide, what is this? And then they dared not think the unthinkable, and they've come to the conclusion that perhaps this is Dogman tracks. Both of these guys have heard of Dogman. They've heard of it from local stories or legends, but they really want to know part of Dogman. These guys are Bigfoot researchers. They said the thought of a Dogman just gave them chills. So as they're discussing it, chills runs down this guy's spine at the thought of such a beast. Now, Jack and Dan, they both get an uneasy feeling, and they suggested, you know what, let's turn around, let's head back to the campsite, because what they encountered, what they seen in these prints, just it set them off. It's something they did not want to deal with. So on the way back to camp, both Jack and Dan thought they're being followed now. Now again, paranoia is probably sitting in. Maybe they're making this up, you guys. Their imaginations, when you see something like this, we all get that feeling. Maybe you're being watched. Maybe you're being followed. But they stop. They look at each other. And like I just suggested, they suggested they're just being paranoid and that their imaginations were getting the best of both of them, especially with the size of this weird track. They finally make it back to their camp and are now relieved. They settle in, they light a fire, and they cook some steaks that they brought from home. And they both kind of laughed, I guess. He's telling me that they were supposed to be roughing it. Yet, they decided to bring some steaks because they wanted to, catch fish and live off the land, right? So anyway, they cook up the steaks, and they also brought some like beef jerky, other canned goods, because they wanted to stay here for a while. He also goes on to say it wasn't deer hunting season, so they couldn't really, get any deer and gut it. I guess these guys really wanted to live off the land. They're talking to me about They want to hunt some deer and do that and prepare it. But anyways, that's why they brought all the food. So while they start to prepare their steaks, Jack and himself decided to make plans to head over into Devil's Lake State Park the following day again and do some further research. Because I guess the tracks that they found earlier, you guys, was just outside the perimeter of the park, so they wanted to go into a different area. That's what I remember now. Okay. They felt safe in their camp, and they have not heard any dogman sightings in this area. It was all predominantly Bigfoot. So their goal was to look for Bigfoot. They finished up their steaks. They sat around. They sat around the fire. They started getting excited about the next excursion the next day in the park. They go on to explain that the sun is now settling down. Hey, Chris, Mindfork. Subscribe to Mindfork, everybody. Awesome show. Thanks to everybody for coming on in. So now they go on to tell me further on the story. Now the sun is already set. It's settling down, and Jack and Dan, they decide to turn in for the night. They brought themselves they brought along a comfortable pop-up tent that was big enough for both of them to sleep in, and to store some of their other wares they brought around with them for the rest of their belongings, and that they had tucked away in a Jeep Cherokee that they drove up in. He's not sure what time it was, but he's guessing it was right around midnight. He goes on to say that the moon was very high, very bright. It was fully illuminating the camp area surrounding them. They were in the middle of the woods with the tree line surrounding them from all directions. So they're in their campsite, getting ready for bed, I guess. And, there's a wood line. They're like in a meadow, I'm guessing. They said their Jeep was parked not very far from them. It was about 20 or 30 feet from them. They snuggle back in their tent, everybody, and they drift off to sleep. Suddenly, they were awakened by a ferocious howling in the distance. The howls grew louder and they grew closer, he goes on to say. These guys are scared. They're frightened. Jack and Dan dare not get out of their tent. They did not even want to unzip it and look out. Then they remembered the prints that they found. The prints that they found earlier. Their minds now start racing about the Dogman. They kept trying to convince themselves that these howls were not Dogman howls, yet they did not sound at all like wolf howls either. So they can't identify the insane vocalizations. All of a sudden, you guys, the howls stop. But now, replacing the howls, everybody, they heard walking around the Jeep. It was bipedal and it was heavy footfall. By the Jeep now, they hear this blood-curdling scream. And then they hear this scraping sound, like metal on metal. The shrills and the scraping along the Jeep lasted only for a few minutes, but to them it seemed like an eternity. An eternity. Upon the ending of these sounds, they heard the smashing of glass and a huge thud. Now their hearts are racing. A smashing of glass, a thud. So these guys are petrified, everybody. They've seen these crazy tracks. They heard now these crazy screams. And now they hear glass breaking and a thud. And these guys are beside themselves. It takes them 10 minutes before they decide to actually exit their tent to look around. They get out of the tent and they start walking over towards the Jeep, which is kind of the area that they identified as where they heard the glass break and the thud. And then what they seen, you guys, according to this guy, was it was like horrific. It was a horrific scene. Goes over to the Jeep, and there are deep scrapes and gouges in the doors of his Jeep, of his vehicle. He goes on to tell me that the impressions were cut at least a quarter inch into the metal. He said the scratch marks ran about 3 rows abreast, and they looked like claw marks. He goes on to say, to make matters worse, in realizing their suspicions, they found, everybody, you guys ready for this? They found those same wolf like prints surrounding the ground about the car. And for those just coming in, these guys seen these 8-inch wolf like prints with extended claws about 6 inches from the appendages of the fingers. Okay. These guys did not stick around to find out. Now they're petrified. Now they're thinking Dogman or some sort of creature. The car is smashed, is gouged out. And also included in this is the thud that they heard with the glass shattering was a tree limb, which was put and which was smashed through their windshield of the car. They clean up the glass around the Jeep, they pack up, and they fled the campsite. He goes on to tell me later on in the story, needless to say, that Jack and Dan's search for Bigfoot has come to a screeching halt because of this experience. They go on to tell me they're not really scared of Bigfoot. It's the other unknown phenomena that forever has struck fear into their hearts, as he tells me in conclusion. And I think that's a travesty, really. I mean, these guys, 3 years amateur Bigfooters, I guess if you want to call them that. And I got to tell you what, if I came across these huge wolf-like prints, I heard these indiscernible howls. It's not a wolf, and it's in their camp, getting close to their camp. Then the big bipedal walking around the Jeep, the claws, the claw marks gouging out the doors, and then the windshield being busted. I don't know that I'd want to go back in the woods. It would take me a while. I asked Dan to send me over a picture of the Jeep because I'd like to see the actual picture if he took a photo of it. He's supposed to said he's going to get it over to me, and I definitely, when I get that, I'm going to share that because I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that evidence. I thought that I thought it was a pretty cool encounter that this guy sent in to me. If you're listening or watching this video, I'd still go looking for Bigfoot. Hey, listen, everybody, we all come across these encounters. If you're a researcher out in the field, that scare us a little bit. But if that's your passion, continue on with it. Continue on with it. So this is going to lead me to the other 2 stories, which you guys are really going to love about dogmen and cemeteries that I can't wait to share with you guys. But before I do that, my mouth is already parched. Don't go nowhere. Give me 30 seconds so I can get a drink of water here, and I'll come back with dogmen at the cemeteries. So stay tuned. Give me about 60 seconds. Yeah, I'm back. I'm a dummy sometimes, you guys, because I never know how long these are going to go when I tell a story or something, right? How much I can remember or whatever, and then all of a sudden, yeah, I'm parched already, so I'm all set. So before we move on, before I forget, thanks to Keith for the awesome super chat, Paul for becoming a pirate, sinfully for your awesome super chat, Paul for your super sticker. And once again to Keith, love you guys. Not expected, but appreciated. So as I said, I got these. So we all hear about these stories about. At least I've heard them about these dogmen around cemeteries, and you know that a lot of legends, a lot of First Nations folks, they believe the dogman is the protector of the cemetery in some legends, and they say that some dogmen just hang out because well, they like to hang out amongst the dead. I don't know, right? My thoughts are on all these, right? I know that I know that I get a lot of them. I've heard a lot of them on other channels, and so sure enough, I've got a couple that I want to get into, and this one has to deal with dogman and shadow people, and the people that are involved in this is a Rich and a Sandy. Rich and Sandy are friends, and they had a little research group that they would go out doing some investigations. And the teller of the guy that sent me this was a Rich, and he goes on. I'm gonna get right on with it. Thanks to everybody for coming on in. Give me a like if not already. I do appreciate it. Helps the algorithm. Thank you for buying my books. Book 2 is pinned up here if you want to check it out. Hi, Kelly Lewis. Hello, Caster Polex. Hello to everybody. If I missed you, I'm trying to look at chat, do the story, and all that. So thank you. If I didn't say your name, give you a shout out. I appreciate you. He goes on to tell me it's a cool evening when he and his friends, which one of them was his girlfriend or his girl or friend, Sally, and a couple other people, right? So they decide to venture out to this old cemetery on the edge of town. Back during this time frame, they said they were in their early 20s, and they had this brimming curiosity and a thirst for the unknown, as he was telling me. He goes on to tell me later on that as the sun dipped below over the horizon, there was a casting of long shadows across the gravestones that made it really spooky because these guys, everybody, they're in the cemetery. And they're ready. All of a sudden, you guys, when they saw when the sun started to settle, they are already getting spooked. They go on to tell me that they found this secluded spot near the back of the cemetery, and they settled in and tried to make themselves more comfortable. And they said as their eyes were out scanning into the darkness, they were looking for any signs of the supernatural. So these people were into everything. They're investigating at a cemetery. I guess they're looking for ghosts or whatever they can come up with, right? There was an eerie silence, and they could not hear anything. Then all of a sudden, they said the silence was broken by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustling of the leaves through the wind. Suddenly, there's a movement out in the cemetery, surrounded by some woods that caught their attention. They get back, they held their breath, they're straining to look out into the cemetery, encompassed by the forest, and they see this shape, kind of a gloomy shape. And they go on to tell me this like it's a very shadowy figure that seemed to glide effortlessly between the tombstones. The form was indistinct to them, but it was always shifting in shapes and sizes. So these guys, it was like again, there was what's the name? Rich and Sandy, and I think a couple of their other friends, which they didn't leave their names. They look at each other. Everybody's hearts are pounding. They're growing very anxious. And they're trying to figure out what the hell are they looking at? What are they looking at here? So they all kind of decided that with the lowering of the sun in the distance, they dismissed it as a trick of light. But then a second shadow now materialized. They go on to say that this shadow was much larger and it appeared to be more menacing than the prior shadow that they allegedly thought they saw. He goes on to say that the thing that was different to everybody about this, it moved very fluidly. The guy goes on to say that it was almost like a predatorial grace the way it moved. They had fear, but they were astonished at the beauty of this. They go on to say that it had this outline that vaguely reminded them of a canine, yet at the same time, everybody, it was very distinctly inhuman. They go on to say that they're all got chills runs down their spine, and they now think that they're now in the presence of something otherworldly. Hey, freaky geek. So they continue watching. They're transfixed as now the other figure comes back in play that they had dismissed. Now these two shadow figures, the one wolf-like, inhuman, and the other shadow person, seem to interact with each other. They go on to say that the movements of these shadow figures, they almost seem very choreographed, I should say. It says that one of the shadows was much smaller and it would dart and it would weave, while the larger one would lunge and then all of a sudden it would growl. Then now they now hear a growl come back in the cemetery from the much larger one. They all became very quiet. They sat in silence, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. They got very uneasy about all of this. They know deep down that they now have encountered something far beyond any of their understanding, something that existed in a different realm outside of their own. Hi, cowboy. That night, they made their way home. They go on to say that the images of the shadow person and the strange dog-like creature haunted their thoughts. They knew that they had a glimpse of something. What it is, they don't know. But they all said that their reality, their perception had changed. They go on to tell me that their life seemed to be a little bit altered. So, when I'm going through this, right, when I'm reading this, to go as far to say as their life is altered, their perception, everything is like totally, they're changing their perspective. I get it a little bit. Right now, I'm not buying the fact. I don't think that would make me change my perspective. Yeah, you saw some shadow people in a cemetery. You made mention that the sun is coming down, casting these shadows, and it could have been light. But here's where the story gets interesting. Several years pass, and all these friends, they started different careers in their different fields of study. Rich goes on to say that it was probably 4 years since any of them were at the cemetery, and with that incident that what happened at the graveyard. They all kept in touch with each other on social media. and occasionally will follow up with each other. But life was moving fast, as they go to tell me, and it was just a challenge for everybody to get together, to take time and talk about their new lives, their careers, this, that, and the other. They all moved to different states, which made any get-togethers much more difficult, right? Then they go on to say that Rich is telling them the most strangest thing and the most peculiar thing had happened. Rich goes on to tell me that he starts having nightmares about the incident at the cemetery or the graveyard. He starts having these dreams for several days in a row. Then, out of chance or perhaps coincidence, he runs into his friend Sally, who was one of the girls with him at the cemetery. He goes on to tell me that he ran into Sally at a restaurant in his hometown on out of state business. They spent a couple hours talking together. It had been several years since he saw Sandy, but this conversation seemed that Sally had something else on her mind. And frankly, Rich wanted to tell her about the nightmares. So they have all this chit chat, catching up on old times, but they both had other things they want to share with each other. So Rich goes on, just before he wanted to divulge his dreams to Sandy, Sandy spoke up and broke the ice and said, "Look," she goes, "I have to tell you, I've been having these nightmares about the night at the cemetery years ago." She says she can't shake them. It's become an obsession for her to find out what it was that they all saw that night. Rich is now flabbergasted. He relays the same thing right back to Sandy. Sandy becomes unnerved. They go on, Sandy goes on to say there has to be some sort of correlation between their dreams, and now wondered if them running into each other was some sort of fate, like they had to be brought together. They also wondered about their other friends that were with them. They wondered if they were experiencing the same nightmares that these guys have been having, right? So Sandy and Rich tried to get a hold of these other two friends that they leave nameless, but there was no avail. Could not get a hold of the other members of their party. So Rich and Sandy decided about a week later, they decided that Sandy and Rich were going to go back to that cemetery. So setting the stage, about 4 years ago, yada yada, they're out. They went to that graveyard. I already told the beginning of the story. They find these shadow people, wolf-like looking creature, intermingling with each other. They just can't believe what they're seeing, and then they leave. Right? They go off on their own, doing their careers or whatever. Then all of a sudden, Rich, Sandy, they run into each other. Was this by chance, you guys? I think they were brought together for a reason. They run into each other, and all of these people live all out of state. It just so happens that Sandy's having a business meeting in his area. They run into each other, boom, and they both are having these nightmares. They're having these nightmares of what occurred 4 years prior. Now they want to go back. They need closure. They need to figure out what's going on. Serendipity, yeah, that's right, Castor Pulex. So I guess Sandy goes, she puts in for vacation, and so did Rich. They decide to meet up at the cemetery on a Monday or a Tuesday, whatever it was. I don't remember. It was during the week. Much like before, they went back to their same spot, and they sat and they waited as the sun disappeared on the horizon, which, if you recall from earlier, is when they started seeing the shadow people. So now they wait and they sit. Rich goes on to tell me that, again, to his astonishment, a shadowy figure seemed to glide effortlessly between the tombstones, just like before. Again, its form indistinct and shifting, just as before. Identical, everybody. Then, minutes later, the same inhuman looking dog like, and he says predatorial beast because of the growl and just the way it conducted itself, appeared dancing once again with the shadow person. So, this right now is a repeat of these two shadowy figures intermingling with each other like they did 4 years prior. This time, the dogman looking entity looked directly at both of them, and it walked on its two legs and went towards them. The other ghostly manifestation, the smaller one, seemed to change, and it changed into that of an animal. It became solid. So the other shadow figure, as this one wolf-like shadow figure is walking at them, the smaller one now becomes solid. It becomes more physical, if you will. He goes on to say that it had the head of a fierce wolf with glistening fangs. Goes on, he was really detailed, an extended snout with high pointed ears. And it looked at them like it was grinning. We've all heard the stories about Dogman grinning, right? I've heard many. That, and how do they even formulate a smile with a snout? But we've all heard it before, a sinister grin. It was a bone chilling grin. Sandy and Rich, they look at each other and they're both paralyzed in fear. Hey, Susie G. And these creatures, the solid looking physical being or wolf, and the ghost like, dog like image are getting closer and closer. Rich tells me that him and Sandy, as these things are getting closer and closer and closer, they both shut their eyes, they hugged each other, and they thought they were about to be unalive, as we have to see on YouTube. Okay. Minutes went by with their eyes closed shut, arm in arm. He goes on to interject, why didn't we not run or anything like that? And he says, frankly, Rob, we were paralyzed with fear. We couldn't even run. Their arm in arm, eyes are shut. Upon opening their eyes, the cemetery shadow person looking wolf was gone, as well as the physical dog man like creature. They got into the car, they drove out of the cemetery, and then both, as they're driving in the car, Sandy and Rich, they get this strange telepathic whisper in both of their ears. And their words rang both in their ears. I hope you're satisfied. Hey, Barry Brown. I hope you're satisfied. So, in conclusion, this guy goes on to tell me, I don't know if this was something out of the world. I don't know if this was a real dog man. I can't explain. He goes on to say he can't differentiate between the physical looking dog like creature and the apparition looking creature. He doesn't know why it troubled these folks. But that was his story. That was his encounter he sent in to me. And he goes, though, the one thing about this alleged telepathic communication that says, now you have your answers. He did reach out to me and says, now, ever since that day, that the Sandy and Rich's dreams have both stopped. I don't know, you guys. I think that they saw something for sure. I think that they were beckoned back to this place. I think that this entity, whatever it was, I think that it's one to satisfy the curiosity, but it gave them warning. It didn't warn them off, you guys, but it says now you have your answers, as if suggesting don't mess around with this. Don't mess around with something that you don't know about. That was my take on it. I thought it was interesting, very creepy, and kind of disturbing in a way. I want to thank everybody for coming on in. Hi, Duke. Good to see you. Thanks to each and every single one of you for coming on in. I appreciate. If you're new here, please subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube, and I've been doing these. If you're just late coming on in, people seem to like when I do these live shows and tell these encounter stories just solo. And so, yeah, I just don't have a schedule to put out because I have 3 scheduled shows throughout the week. And so when I have time during the week, I'm going to do these. As long as you keep watching, I'll keep doing them. And because Lord knows I got quite a bit. Hey, Midnight Smoker. Good to see you. Good. Hey, Barbara Mora, how are you? Go Lions. Sporting my Lions gear Saturday, 8 o'clock. Lions, Commanders. I know you guys don't give a rat's ass about football, but I love me some Lions. Always have. Thanks for coming in. Give me the thumbs up. Give me a like. I got the last one for you. Again, it revolves around a cemetery. I came up with this. I found this. This is kind of a part of the story, but I was just reading up on some things, and I copied this excerpt from an alleged Dogman, what this guy thought about Dogman. His name was Ralph Finney's, so I'm gonna give him credit. I'm gonna read this because this kind of goes into the story I'm gonna tell you guys, and I found it very eerie, and it matches up with the story this other guy told me. The email I got from some dude named Robert. Yeah, a Robert, right? So listen on to this quick little reading, then I'm going to go tell you this story. This one's called Cemetery Dogman. Thanks again for everybody for coming on in. Deep within the realms of urban legends and folklore lies a chilling tale that has captivated the imaginations of many. The legend of Dogman. This eerie creature said to roam cemeteries under the cloak of darkness has become a staple in supernatural lore. Countless eyewitnesses' accounts and spine-tingling encounters have cemented its status as one of the most terrifying legends in modern times. Again, this is some reading that I found, okay? The origins of this legend can be traced back to ancient mythology, where half human, half animal creatures were often depicted as guardians or omens. Kind of like what I talked about earlier. So it kind of does match up, and it is pretty relevant. It's also relevant to this story. However, it is in recent years that reports of actual sightings have surged, fueling speculation and intrigue. Witnesses describe a towering beast with a wolf-like head and an imposing human-like body that prowls among tombstones with an air of malevolence. As dusk settles over the cemetery, an eerie stillness descends upon the grounds. The air feels heavy, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. The moon's pale glow casts elongated shadows, kind of like the last story. This all kind of matches up. That's why I thought this was cool to share before I go on. The rustling of leaves and distant hoots of owls are the only sound that break the silence. And it's funny because I mentioned owls in the one story, right? So this is why I thought I'd read this first. Tombstones rise like sentinels from the earth. Again, makes sense, matches up. Their weathered surfaces bearing witness to countless tales of sorrow and loss. Moss-covered statues stand guard over forgotten graves. Again, hate to repeat myself what I talked about earlier. Their stoic faces frozen in perpetual mourning. Ancient trees loom overhead, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. An inexplicable chill snakes its way through the air, causing goosebumps to form on your skin. Whispers seem to echo through the night, carried on an unseen breeze. Then it appeared, and those statues came to life. I thought that was extremely cool. I don't even know how I came across that. And it really applied to, the last story I did and even the first one. So I thought I would, that's not me. That's something, I can't take credit for that. But it also takes place in this encounter story that was sent in to me. And I think it matches up. I want to thank you all for coming on in again. Hey, Smokey. Thanks for coming in, Cindy. Thanks to everybody. Hey, Pancho, what's up? So yeah, here's the last one. And I'm gonna move on. And this was sent to me from some dude named Robert. Of course, he goes on to say, "Hey, Rob, I'm using the pen name Robert. Okay, whatever." He goes on to tell me about this encounter that he heard that he had back in July of 2019. He's very descriptive. I like this because he tells me a lot of good facts, a lot of good things that I researched, that I looked up, that add up, right? He goes on to tell me that this location of this encounter was in Mountainside Cemetery in Georgetown, Maine. So the state of Maine. If Riley Ron is out there, you're from Maine. Thank you, Diane. Thanks to everybody. And again, he goes on to say this is an island location with the Atlantic Ocean to the east, the Kennebec River, the Sasona River, Saginaw Bay, and other tributaries surrounding the island. In fact, he goes on to say it's the town of Georgetown Island. He goes on to state that, hey, you almost forget that it's an island, is there are many ways to access the island from the roads, bridges, and interstates that connect to the mainland. He goes on to tell me he's blowing smoke up my butt. I've watched your show many times from a distance. I'm never in chat. I guess you can call me a lurker. Mostly, though, I often catch the replays. Well, thanks, buddy. He goes on to tell me he became obsessed with cryptids back in 2015. He was interested in Bigfoot, Dogman, the Rake, ghouls, skinwalkers, you name it. In fact, he goes on to say he listened to my show, and in fact, he listens to texts. And he's been watching us for about 2 years. Goes on and on. Well, thank you for the accolades. Enough of that already. He goes on to tell me he suffers from PTSD. He says that he's been seemingly losing his mind since 2019. He goes on to tell me, not only did I see a dog man at the cemetery, Rob, he also goes on to say that he saw lifeless statues come to life, seemingly at the dog man's command. So the reason I read that one excerpt earlier for you guys kind of matches this dude's story. How I came across that, luck, I guess. Or maybe it was intended me to find it. I don't know. But anyway, thought that was very interesting. Back in 2015, his research began. He looked into the BFRO website and found 21 reports in Maine. The vast majority came from Oxford County, Maine, situated approximately 90 miles or so where he lives in Georgetown. He spent 2 years looking for Bigfoot and Dogman. He had come across sets of Bigfoot tracks, tree breaks, and heard several whoops and vocalizations from the woods. However, nothing really close to a possible dogman or hell, even a wolf for that matter. At least in my mind, I don't believe so, he says. He goes on to say that he got a little tired of making his trip to Oxford all the time and realized that 90 miles is really not that far from his hometown. So he decided to start a new research area in Georgetown in 2018. He says he starts to reading about cemeteries and what types of cryptids roam the land. He was surprised to read accounts on dogman and skinwalkers, and often being reported as being found here in this area. He goes on to say there's about 4 cemeteries in the area that he decided to look into. And they all started at the Mountainside Cemetery. He says he picked this area because it's not the biggest. However, it's the creepiest. It's surrounded by the forest with the interstate leading up to its accessibility. He goes on to tell me he spent almost 1 year researching the area leading to 2019. He said he would research both during the day and during the night. He said he would explore the cemetery and all the woods surrounding the area. He goes on to say that many times, particularly at night, he thought he heard whispers out of the darkness that gave him chills. Hey, Rick from Ohio. Thanks for coming on in. If anybody's new here, please subscribe to BMR. Thank you, Rick. Again, thanks to everybody in the chat room. Obviously, I can't see everybody. I know you're all in here. There's over 70 of you. I really appreciate you guys. And thank you. Hit that like button for me, would you? I appreciate y'all. Anyway, where was I at thinking here? Okay. So he hears these whispers out of the darkness. It gives him chills. He goes on to say that once he found a set of oversized wolf-like tracks. He goes on to explain to me they were 7 inches long, maybe 5 inches wide. He's thrilled with this finding. He's ready. He's gung-ho. He's like most of us out there. That if you're into this sort of thing, he's excited. He goes on to tell me, see, in this particular area, the only things that they really have are moose, deer, osprey, bald eagles, and most of the fauna. That's most of the fauna in the area. No wolves, I guess. But I think there are wolves in Maine, to be honest with you. He says no real predators except for the exception of the eagle and the moose. I didn't really I don't recognize the moose as a predator. I do recognize the moose as something that will kill you, but I don't think they seek you out. This is my opinion. I could be wrong. So now this guy's really excited, and he thinks he's onto something, right? So now this guy in this area, he decides to spend many more months, and he's researching and looking harder than before because of what he came across. But now he starts coming up empty. So now out of frustration, he starts looking up. So now, you guys, this is where this guy, he takes it to an extreme level here. The average Joe that looks for cryptids, I don't care what it is, you're not going to find a Bigfoot. You're not going to find a Dogman. First of all, why look for Dogman? I believe Dogman is something that's from a different realm of reality. I don't classify it anywhere close to a Bigfoot. Hell, I don't even think I'd call a Dogman a cryptid, if I'm being honest with you guys. But leading up to what I'm about to tell you guys, you have to put in your due diligence. You have to put in time. Researchers have spent 20 years and not seen anything outside of the basic evidence, breaks, structures, maybe some prints, maybe some hair, this, that, and the other. But this guy's taking this to the next level. And this is what he goes on to tell me, which I totally do not agree with. He says, out of his frustration at not coming across any more evidence or clues or whatever you want to call it, he starts looking up chants. He starts looking up chants incantations upon his next visit to this cemetery. Okay, you guys. I mean, as I alluded to earlier, you don't look up incantations, chants, and start reciting this into the forest. I'm sorry. You just don't do that because you don't know what you don't know what you're getting into here, okay? Um so hang on, I gotta look up something really quick for you guys. Hang on. Anyway, thanks to everybody for coming on in. I just gotta look up something because I got something's on my computer that I'm trying to get off. I don't know what it is. Just bear with me. I almost got to figure it out here. Okay, I got it cleared. Whatever it was, it was bugging me. I had to get rid of it. Some advertisement. I hate when that happens. Anyway, so this guy's doing back to the story. This guy, incantations. He wants to conjure something up. That's a no on my book. July of 2019. This guy says he makes the mistake that he thinks it puts his life in jeopardy. Okay. Yeah, Duke. That's how you get the attention of animals, minions, the dog man. Yep. So anyway, he makes this mistake. He starts doing all these weird chants in the woods, everybody. He says one night it's midnight. He went out to the cemetery fully equipped with all of what he was going to recite. So this guy plans it out. He goes to the graveyard, goes to the cemetery. He's been looking up all these incantations, and now he's got what he wants to say out and project into the forest. And I guess during this email, he says, I'm not going to give you the incantation for your own safety. I kind of appreciate that in a strange way because there's no way I'm going to read this, an incantation. So what this guy does, everybody, he gets together, he gathers a bunch of rocks around from these grave sites, from these deceased people. He starts stealing, literally, the rocks and everything around the grave sites, and he conducts and he puts together a big circle. I mean, come on, dude. Taking rocks from grave sites makes a big circle. This is some dark stuff. This is like almost like black magic. And I know this guy's not he's trying to practice black magic, right? So he sets up this circle to his liking, whatever. And then he starts this incantation. I know, Duke. Gamma Rob. I don't know. There must be something wrong with my lighting here. I love you, Duke. World Bigfoot Central. He's got the Glag Saga. Go check out Duke. That's an awesome, awesome story. Anyways, this incantation lasts about 10 minutes, he tells me. Now the guy's waiting, right? Okay. Then all of a sudden, about after 10 minutes after reciting this, pronouncing this into the universe, he says the wind grows cold and is gusting hard enough to blow his baseball cap off of his head. Then in the distance, he sees a set of glowing red eyes emerge from the northern woodline and approach the graveyard. So when I hear red eyes, I personally immediately think evil. Now, I could be wrong. That's just me. But I associate red with something nefarious. That's just me. He goes on to say that the red eye shine, was at least 6 or 7 feet above the ground. So, red eye shine, 6, 7 feet above the ground. Yeah, that's sizable. He goes on to say that the eyes grew closer and it was a figure of a man. Red eyes of a man. So he says. And then the man began to form and it took on the shape of a wolf. He says it's translucent, yet the shape was very distinctive. This guy is now, telling me it stares into his soul, he says. Yeah, Well, yeah, I'm sure it did. Projecting what you're projecting into the universe, as I said earlier. Now he says this, or whatever it is, you guys. It started to prance and dance about the headstones of the figures where he took to rocks. So the guy stole these rocks. Well, we didn't. I shouldn't say steal. He took rocks from these headstones and these grave sites, random grave sites, made the circle. And now, from all the grave sites that in the headstones where he took these rocks, is where the prancing about these sites took place. Then he goes on to say now it takes the shape of a full wolf. He says dogman like entity. Now he becomes even more terrified, he goes on to tell me, because not only is he experiencing some sort of wolf like apparition, entity, dogman, now the statues in the forest around these tombstones appear to take on a life of their own. The reason why I read that little quote earlier is because, again, in happenstance, is kind of measuring up to this entire encounter this guy told me about, right? The heads of the statues moved and turned towards him. So the statues on these statues that have the heads on them are moving and looking at him. The once basic looking faces turn to scowls. And he says that their eyes, the stoned eyes. First of all, these are stoned objects, statues. They kind of turn their head, and now the eyes now, which are made of stone. Obviously, the entire statue is made of stone, I'm guessing. Now the eyes take a life to them. And they glowed. These eyes in the statues glowed. He goes on to say an orange, variety of colors, an orange, a yellow, or red. He goes on to say that this Dogman entity now appears to play the role of a puppet master. And they all seem to act on this Dogman entity's every action. Like he was their leader. He was the puppet master pulling the strings with these statues. Then he says the whispers inside his head began. Words were uttered in him loudly. They spoke of these variety of these different sentences. And in this guy's mind, either it's this dogman creature or these statues from the cemetery where he totally messed things up, were saying things like, why did you do this? Why have you disturbed our rest? And a very scary one says, you've unleashed evil, which I'm guessing everybody, is maybe this Dogman creature, the puppet master, if you will. I guess he says after hearing the phrase evil and the life force that was transfixed on these statues, he shuts his eyes, he looks down, then before he knows it, this Dogman entity was right in front of him, hovering above the ground in front of him, not even 4 feet away. I agree, Head Trip. Totally bad information, man. And I got to figure out. I don't know if I want to know what that book was. Telepathically, he says this whatever it is speaks to him again in his conscious mind. This guy says the words that are communicated to this dude who conjured up all this. He gets running through his head is the words "You shall suffer." Guy goes on, Rob, man, that chilled me when that came. He goes, as frightening as this entire account was of the other phrases that were sent out to him, to hear the words "You shall suffer" chilled him to the core. I don't blame. I mean, this guy, this guy got this guy. This I'm not going to say right now. The guy flees the place. He goes home, wakes up the next morning. He's in his bed. Then he thinks to himself, I must be dreaming. I must be dreaming. He goes on to tell me he gets rid of the book of incantations and vowed never to explore the cemetery nor look for Dogman again. He goes on to say he learned his lesson. So now you guys got to back up, and this thing says he's going to suffer. That's very important. The last thing that he gets telepathically communicated is, why did you do this? You shall suffer now. And boy, did this guy suffer. A few hours later, that next morning, okay, the wife, he's married, I guess, as he says he has a wife. A few hours later, the wife, who was pregnant with their first child, along with her adopted son, Grant, who was 13, asked how the investigation went on. I said to my wife, yeah, I just went out researching, no big deal. Then the wife says, hell, of course, silly man. Of course, you silly man. Like wives say to their husbands, you're a silly man. And then all of a sudden, this guy freaked out and dropped to his knees. Again, the prior night, this crazy encounter, which he brought upon himself, I firmly do believe, wakes up, kind of thinks he's dreaming, and his wife is kidding him about how the night went. And of course, he lies. And now all of a sudden, he just drops to his knees in terror for whatever the reason. The wife goes on to ask this guy, what's wrong? And then the husband retorts back, well, honey, I did something that I think I'm soon going to regret. And he goes on and he apologizes in advance to his wife because he thinks now something's going to happen. Hi, Joe Stewart. He goes on to say that the wife comforted him and told him, I tell you what, going to the cemetery, going to the graveyard, not a wise decision. You're obviously affected by this for whatever the reason. She goes, stop doing that and stop looking for the Dogman creature. So y'all heard the story. All these things took place. The threatening telepathic thoughts were put into this man's head from this entity in the woods. Beautiful wife. It appears like he has a cool wife. And here's where the tragedy strikes, you guys. From this guy messing with something he should not have. 2 weeks later, his wife, well, they lost their first child. She was pregnant, as I mentioned. They lost a child. Doesn't get into the details on that. Then, unmercifully, and if you remember, I told you guys that part of this cemetery flowed through the Kennebec River, which is key for this other bit of information I'm going to tell you now. Unmercifully, Grant, their adopted child or son, drowned in the Kennebec River not 2 weeks after the wife lost their first child. The pregnant woman. Pregnant lady, poor woman, lost his child. A couple weeks later, the son drowns. The adopted son drowns in the Kennebec River. Goes on to tell me, Rob, as of 2023, my wife and I have gotten a divorce. She wants nothing to do with me. Thinks that I brought this on. He goes on to tell me he can't hold a job. Goes on to tell me his life today is meaningless. This guy's actually, I can read this email. This guy wants sympathy from me. Listen, there's a lot of things that I will do looking for certain cryptids or ghosts. I'm down for paranormal research. I'm down for looking for ghosts. I'm down for looking for Bigfoot. Do I really want to look for Dogman? From what I've heard about Dogman, I'd like to stay away from that. But I'm not going to read from the Book for the Dead, incantations, whatever this guy read. I don't even know what this guy read. I don't want to know what he read because I don't want that voodoo put on me, right? So I'm glad he didn't send me over what he said. He did something terrible. So I can't really feel sorry for this guy. I feel sorry for the wife. I'm sorry to sound heartless, but this guy, man. Anyways, I'm off. I'm going through this. I'm getting emotional for the wife now. But anyways, okay, blah blah blah. He can't hold a job. Life is meaningless. I need some help. But then he says, Rob, I fear I've chosen evil over everything else, and I fear that my soul is lost. Yeah, I fear his soul's lost as well, man. If you're listening, I'm sorry to, call you out, call you an asshole, but you are. That's a terrible story. Lesson to be learned here, you guys. You don't read from these, you don't recite incantation. You just don't do what this guy did. You don't do these things. Well, if you're not, hey, listen, there are people out there that study demonic activity. There are demonologists that study this. They go to college for this, and they know what they're doing. They're professional. Average Joe, average Robert, as he calls himself, who's getting frustrated because he hadn't found anything in the woods after finding that print, decides to, muster up some voodoo. Well, little Patty says he needs to cleanse himself. Well, he can do whatever he wants to do. Good luck to him. You just don't do that, you guys. I know you guys probably don't do that, but if the thought ever ventured into your mind, you don't read from. I don't know what he read from. Book of the Dead, whatever it was. I don't know. He didn't tell me, and I'm glad he didn't tell me, but you don't do things that you shouldn't be doing. You don't practice things you have no clue of what you're doing. Because I will tell you, if you summon something, I think we all can we can all conjure up things with deep thought. I think you can meditate hard enough on something. You can bring something into fruition, I know that I've done it, but with positive things, not negative things. that was that story ends up being, terribly frightening. And, I feel sorry for the family. Yeah, I guess I feel sorry for the guy. Sure. I mean, he didn't know what he was doing. So maybe I was hard on the guy. Okay. I'm not a heartless person, but, he brought it upon himself. He did something that he thought, and I know this guy probably thought there was something about this. He probably believed in this. He didn't seem like a person that, it's a fair weather fairy tale about all these things. So he had intent behind his actions. Certainly the intent wasn't to lose a child and then have his adopted son drowned in the area of where this all took place. I want to thank everybody for coming on. I thought it was a pretty cool show. I thought the stories were pretty cool. Again, these are random. I'm not including them in a schedule yet, but you guys seem to like them, and when I can do them, I'll do them for you. Today is what? Yeah, Blaza Brews are on the night. I think Tex is going live. I think Tex is doing a show tonight on a paranormal wrestler or something in a half hour with Donnie and Randy. I told them I'd come on, but I'm getting hungry. I got to make some dinner here. I appreciate everybody for coming on in. I do want to thank really briefly before I sign out, Keith, Paul, Simply Wicked, Paul again, Keith again for your super chats and memberships. That's awesome. Donations, of course, not expected, but always gratefully appreciated. As I said earlier, go check out Duke Sullivan, World Bigfoot Central. He's got doing the saga of Glag. And if you have never heard it, you got to kick back and listen to it. It's a great story about his friend and Bigfoot, how they became friends. Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a really cool story. Go check out Duke. Subscribe to the Blondes and the Booze, Texas Front Porch, Donnie Cho Says Stuff, Paranormal Paul, Monica Rollins, Our Paranormal World, Daniel Diva, and I think that covers us, World Bigfoot Central as well. Thank you. I appreciate y'all. Hit the like button on your way out. Please do so for BMR. And I'll see you. Maybe I'll see you Saturday night late after the Lions game, but I will be on Saturday night at 11. We're dropping back from midnight to 11 for you guys because a lot of you said, "Hey, man, we can't stay up that late." So we're going back an hour. I'll be late depending on the Lions game because they're playing Saturday at 8 o'clock. Game will go to 11. And depending on my mood, well, I'll be there, but I'll be late. So go check that out. Subscribe if you're new. And with that being said, I'll see y'all at the conference, right?
This is the future. Evolution. This is the future. Evolution.